First of all, Africa is not a poor continent. It's not. It is a continent that has many, many resources. Moreover, rare earth, metals, raw materials, 50% of arable lands. We're not taking care of that. And Africa today is victim of many external spoilers that work against its stability. It is something that can be used against us.
And with regard to Africa, the issue of China comes up.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about that. Is China dominating or trying to dominate the continent and scooping up some of those raw materials and metals that you mentioned that are so critical to technology?
Absolutely, China has an important presence at the time in Africa. And, well, I think it's normal that everyone tries to defend its national interests. The problem is if we are able to do that. I mean, what I don't really agree with is the approach that sometimes the West world had with these countries. For the idea I have is that we are always ready to give advices, but not so ready to give a hand. They don't trust us a lot. And I cannot say that they are completely wrong. That's why my opinion is that we have to change this approach. What I want to do is to bring investments in Africa. Bring investments not only to say we want to help. No, that's not geopolitics. If you want to do serious things, you have to do things that are useful for both. For example, now we have a problem in Europe about energy sources after the war. But Africa is potentially an enormous producer of energy, of every kind of energy, green energy, hydrogen, geothermic, they've got gas, they've got everything. So if we help them taking out and producing this energy, and we tie them with Europe, we will solve many problems together.
Look at the ECOWAS membership. Only 2 countries have not had coups. Only Cape Verde and Senegal. So you can understand the quagmire ECOWAS finds itself in. Credibility crisis, lacking the moral right. All of these countries, when coups happen, the Nigerians will tell you, why was there not an intervention? I mean, if you do the counting, since ECOWAS was established in 1975, there has been about 126 coups. Over the last 3 years, there have been 6 coups already. 2 in Mali, 2 in Burkina Faso. So there's a real credibility crisis. And this attempt to now say, you see, we must be hardlined, we must use force, and that will serve as a deterrent. I am afraid. I take a totally different view. I do not think that military intervention is what will stem the tide. Rather, they should look at the causative factors. All of this bad leadership, people using democracy to entrench themselves, to kill their people. Look at how many opposition leaders have been imprisoned in Senegal, how many protesters have been shot in Senegal by a democratically elected leader. Look at the state of unemployment on the continent. Look at the state of corruption. Niger, if you look at all the UN multidimensional poverty analysis, is below the ladder. The poorest, and yet they have uranium. Yet they have this pipeline which others are leveraging to advance their economic interests. And the masses, will you believe that about 80% of the people in Niger don't have access to electricity? Can you believe that? Basic amenities. And only a few elites enjoy. Once they go into these negotiations and their family cronies get a good piece of the pie, the rest can go to hell. Then the elephant in the room, if you look at this new wave of coups, they are all happening in Francophone Africa. We must be honest to have a discussion about the French hegemony in the sub-region. This Charles de Gaulle pact must give way. There is great resentment on the continent against this influence of France. as we all say, the French never left. The Brits, if you look at the decolonization, the disengagement, they left fully, we became Republican status and all of that. You can't say same of the French. And the masses are rebelling. One factor that these ECOWAS leaders haven't considered is look at the level of popularity. If anybody tells you that these coups are not popular, look, I have friends in Niger. I have done my own independent analysis because I know that during these times there's a lot of propaganda. Talk to people on the ground. Talk to ordinary people. It was the same in Mali.
Well, moving on to Africa. Again, Niger's coup leaders have asked the French and German ambassadors to leave the country within 48 hours. That's after it authorised Mali and Burkina Faso to intervene on its territory in the event of any foreign interference.
The three countries have reached an agreement to facilitate mutual assistance in defense and security matters in the event of aggression or a terrorist attack, and decided to set up a framework for consultation to enable them to coordinate their actions in order to deal with the multiple situations and challenges to which we are exposed.
ECOWAS said it is worried about narratives of its planned military action in Niger being misinterpreted by reports suggesting that the bloc was beating the drums of war. President of the Commission, Omar Toure, said, I quote, ECOWAS has neither declared war on the people of Niger, nor is there a plan as being purported to invade the country. The ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government has only activated a full-scale application of sanctions, end quote, and that includes what he called the legitimate use of force. Toure said ECOWAS took that firm position only after due consideration of how political dialogue alone has unfortunately failed to deter coup plotters in the region. West Africa has reported 7 coups since 2020, including in Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Last month, soldiers of the Presidential Guard deposed President Mohamed Bazoum and have detained him and his family despite calls for their release. Omar Toure also said ECOWAS was concerned about reports of worsening insecurity, excessive use of force, and arbitrary arrests in Niger. He said military administrations in the region have not demonstrated capacity to deal with complex political, social, and security challenges, and that Niger's coup had plunged the country into socio-economic crisis. On Thursday, Niger authorized Mali and Burkina Faso's armed.
Burkina Faso and Mali have issued a joint statement saying they'll regard any military intervention in Niger as a declaration of war on them. The two countries, which have also both seen recent military coups, said they would come to the defence of their eastern neighbour in such a scenario. It's after a West African bloc gave Niger's military 7 days to give up power and threatened to use force if they didn't do so. Before that joint statement from Mali and Burkina Faso was released, Niger's ambassador to the US spoke to my colleague Sumi Somaskanda.
This coup has really no reason whatsoever. There was no political tension. There is no security situation that is worsening, as they claimed. That just fades. The security situation is improving. In our country, you accept the power by the ballot, not by the bullets. And we have elected a legitimate president, Mohamed Bazoum, and we want him to be restored, like all the international community, ECOWAS, the regional body, Africa Union, the United States of America, France, all our partners, the European Union, all are asking them just to give back power to President Bazoum.
You mentioned ECOWAS. I do want to ask you, ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States, and they have threatened military action. Would you welcome that West African states would stage a military intervention here?
I would hope and wish a peaceful solution, that the junta will come to reason and give back power to President Bazoum and to the parliament that were again elected in a fair and transparent election. But if that is not possible, I will not rule out any solution that will restore democracy in my country.
Including a military intervention?
Absolutely, I will not rule out any solution, because this junta in Africa comes to power by the force. They want to substitute force to election. This is not acceptable. They do exactly the same as the terrorist jihadist group were fighting. Because we have the bullets, we have to rule the country.
But if there were to be a military intervention, we could then see a full-fledged conflict between the military leaders and any intervening forces. Are you worried about that?
Again, I am worried about anything that will create damage to my people. But if the choice is to the junta, they have to come back to reason. They have to realize that just because you have the bullets, because you have the arms, you are not ruling a country. If you want to rule a country, you have to run in an election.